If God really loved me, why were all my questions treated as sin? That sentence didn't come out of my mouth. It exploded inside me at 14 years old in the middle of a youth meeting. I didn't want to offend anyone. I just wanted to understand why there were so many contradictions, so much fear disguised as faith. From that point on, something broke. I didn't know I was beginning a journey that would take me away from everything I knew, to bring me closer, for the first time, to the truth my soul had been silently seeking for years. My name is Kurt Wallace. I'm 19 years old and I'm from New Zealand. I was born into a Jehovah's Witness family, and for a long time I believed that questioning was synonymous with rebellion. But what you're going to hear now isn't a story of rebellion. It's a story of thirst. Thirst for answers that no one seemed willing to give. Before I continue with this testimony, tell me here in the comments, what city and country are you watching this video from? Your presence here is no coincidence. Maybe your soul is also seeking what mine was seeking. And if this video touches you in any way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can reach you. Since I was little, I learned that God is not to be questioned. I grew up hearing this repeatedly at Jehovah's Witness meetings. But what happens when doubts don't disappear, but instead increase? When each explanation generates a new question? I didn't want to be rebellious. I just wanted to understand. Why are we punished for Adam's mistake if we weren't even there? Why would an all-powerful God need to sacrifice his own son to forgive us? And if he can do everything, why not simply forgive? The more I asked, the more vague answers I received. Accept it by faith. It's God's mystery. You need to mature spiritually. But it wasn't immaturity, it was honesty. Faith cannot be fear of asking, and the absence of answers crushed me, as if I were unworthy of knowing the truth. When my parents separated, it was as if what little spiritual stability we had evaporated. Religion disappeared from our lives, and with it came silence. But inside me, something remained lit, a deep desire to understand life's purpose. I threw myself into farm work to try to occupy my mind, but the questions pursued me in the fields, in the early mornings, in the sound of the wind, and every time I tried to return to inherited faith, I hit the same wall, a closed system, with circular answers and a peace that never came. It was in this emptiness that by chance, or maybe not, I watched a TV program with words I didn't understand, but that hit me as if my soul knew the language. It was Arabic, it was Islam, and even without understanding, something inside me screamed, "Pay attention to this." I followed that impulse. I requested a Quran. And when the books arrived, still not knowing that delivery was a spiritual key, my life began to change. Because in less than half an hour of reading, those old questions, the ones no one answered, were answered. Clearly. Without beating around the bush. Without fear. The feeling was as if someone had turned on the light in a room where I had been stumbling since childhood. The truth is that none of the previous answers had really been an answer. They were high walls with ready-made phrases written on them. But Islam was an open door. And when I opened that door for the first time, something impossible to explain happened. The package arrived simply, without ceremony. A copy of the Quran and some introductory booklets. I set the Quran aside at first. It seemed too big, like trying to climb a mountain without knowing where to step. I started with the smaller books. In less than 20 minutes, tears I didn't even realize I was holding back began to fall. I wasn't emotional because of beautiful stories. I was in shock because the questions that had tortured me since childhood were there, answered. And with disconcerting clarity, the Quran doesn't hide behind complicated metaphors. It doesn't demand blind faith. It invites reflection. It explains that Adam and Eve made a mistake, yes, but they also repented, and God forgave them. There is no inherited curse. Each soul carries only what it chooses. And regarding Jesus' sacrifice, in Islam, Jesus, Isa, peace be upon him, is one of the most honored prophets, but not the Son of God. There is no cross. There is no delegated punishment. Forgiveness comes directly from God, and that made me cry. Because for the first time God seemed just and accessible. I found myself rereading the same sentences like someone caressing an old scar, now healed. The peace I had always sought didn't come as a passing emotion. It came as a silent certainty. I knew I had found the source, a God who doesn't punish without purpose, a faith that doesn't tell doubt to be quiet, but welcomes it with firm answers. That wasn't just religion, it was truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from insomnia, but because my heart was awake. I knew I had been touched by something divine. And even without knowing any Muslims, even without knowing the correct pronunciation of Arabic words, I said to myself, I'm going to follow this to the end. I can't pretend I didn't see it. That was the breaking point, because when the soul hears the truth, it can no longer sleep in deception. I thought the hardest part would be understanding the pillars of Islam, learning to pray correctly, changing habits. But I was wrong. The biggest challenge wasn't internal, it was external. Because no one prepares you to see the shock in your own mother's eyes. She didn't hear it from me, and that already weighs on me. I wanted to have waited longer, studied more, learned to answer before telling her. But my decision escaped before the right moment, through a simple post in a forgotten corner of my Facebook. A short sentence. Today, I declared my faith. I am Muslim, nothing more. And even so, it was as if a bomb had exploded inside her house. That same night, the phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice trembled, almost unrecognizable. She was crying, couldn't finish sentences. She thought she had lost me, that some radical group had taken me away, that the faith she herself had cultivated, though full of doubts, had been betrayed by me. And behind every word there was a silent scream. Who are you now? I wanted to hug her and say I was still the same son, that I was just following the truth, not an enemy. But how do you explain that calmly when her world seemed to be crumbling? I wasn't prepared. I didn't have the answers organized. So I did what I could. I listened. I endured her despair like someone holding back a strong wave hitting their chest, and then I let time do its part. In the following days I sent simple booklets, excerpts from the Quran in English, not to convince her, but so she could at least understand my choice. I knew that, being the mother she was, loving, honest, curious, she would give truth a chance, if it were presented peacefully. And that's what happened. Slowly, she began to read. She began to ask. She began to see. And although fear still lived in some corners of her heart, something new began to be born. Respect. A love without barriers, without control, without despair. Because sometimes the first step for someone to approach the truth is to see that truth flourish in the life of someone they love most. I thought the most my mother could offer me would be tolerance. But God had written something else. What began as fear ended as faith. It was 3 months. 3 months between crying and understanding, between confusion and surrender. She didn't tell me anything, and I didn't pressure her either. I just saw, gradually, signs of something different. Her questions changed in tone. They were no longer accusatory, nor laden with pain. Now they had brightness, they had searching, they had thirst. One afternoon she called me, her voice calm but serious. "Son, can you come here tonight? I want to show you something." I went. I arrived with my heart racing, prepared for anything except for what I heard. My mother was waiting for me with the Quran open on the table, and she said, without beating around the bush, with tears in her eyes, "I took the Shahada." I froze. I thought I had heard wrong. But she repeated, "I declared the faith. I am Muslim." It was one of the strongest moments of my life. I hugged her as if I were hugging a miracle, because it was. She told me that in the silence of days, in solitary reading, she fell in love with the one she thought was distant, and that the more she read about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the more she felt that this was the path she had always sought, but never had the courage to imagine. She didn't become another person. She finally became herself, the woman who always had faith, but lived with swallowed questions. The mother who taught me to be honest now found her own truth with the same integrity. It wasn't momentary emotion. It was a decision with foundation. It was voluntary submission. After years of trying to understand the world with the wrong pieces, and from that day on, something aligned within me. We were no longer on different sides. We were on the same ground, in the same prayer, serving the same God, now with understanding. God gave me two gifts on that journey, the truth and my mother by my side to live it with me. I knew that convincing my father would be impossible, but sometimes God doesn't want us to win. He wants us to respect. My father had always been a rock, firm, unchanging, faithful to his beliefs like a soldier to his oath. A Jehovah's Witness for more than 5 decades, he carried that religion like someone carries a surname, with pride, with identity, with heritage. When I told him I had converted to Islam, there were no screams. There were no fights. There was a heavy silence, the kind of silence that settles when the world changes, but the heart still doesn't know how to react. He didn't reject me, but he didn't congratulate me either. He just listened. And then, for the first time, he responded with a sentence I never imagined coming from his mouth. Then, tell me why. I knew that was my chance to honor him, not as someone who wants to convince, but as someone who was convinced. I spoke of old doubts, of the peace I found, of the clear logic that filled me, and for the first time my father didn't interrupt. In the days that followed, he began visiting me less frequently, but he began asking questions. Why do you pray 5 times a day? What does Allah mean? Do you really believe that Jesus is not the Son of God? I didn't have all the answers, but I had serenity, and that's what disarmed him. Over time, he came to admit that he knew little about Islam, and out of curiosity nor affection, he accepted a copy of the Quran that I had left on the table. He didn't say he read it, but one day he quoted a passage. That was enough for me. Today we have a silent truce. He continues being a Jehovah's Witness. I continue being Muslim. But something between us was restored. Respect. He no longer tries to convert me, and I don't try to force him to understand. The love between father and son found a new language, that of coexistence with honor, even between different paths. Maybe he'll never convert, but he saw my heart change. And that already made something change in his, because when truth transforms someone from within, even those who don't believe begin to think. My father didn't understand me, but something in me began to speak louder than any explanation. My new routine. The deepest transformation didn't come from a visible miracle. It came from the details, from mornings when I woke up before the sun, not out of obligation, but because I felt my soul needed to be washed. It came from the way I began to behave at work, with more patience, from the way I began to look at people, even those who criticized me, with more compassion than anger. Islam didn't take me to a cave, nor demand that I abandon life. It just cleaned the lens through which I saw everything. Things that were once mundane now gained meaning, saying Bismillah before eating, avoiding lies, even small ones, keeping promises, treating time as something sacred. Suddenly, my life had rhythm, had center, and it was as if every detail was being supervised by someone greater, more just, more intimate than I had ever imagined. At first I thought I would have to work very hard to be a good Muslim. But it wasn't like that. What happened was that the more I knew Allah, the more I wanted to please him, not out of fear, but out of love. Praying 5 times a day stopped being a rigid ritual. It became the balance point of my mind, an emotional reset in the middle of routine. I continued going to the beach with my daughters. I continued participating in barbecues with friends, as long as there was no alcohol. I continued laughing loud, playing, living. But now all of this happened with consciousness, with presence, with intention. It wasn't a repressed life, it was a life freed from inner chaos. Even my friends, the most skeptical ones, began to notice. "You're different," they said, "lighter." And the truth is, I was, not because of an exterior change, but because the small daily choices were aligned with a greater truth. And that truth was so solid that not even the doubts of those around me could shake it. Islam reorganized my life without destroying it. It didn't uproot my roots. It just watered what was already planted, but dry. And today, even the simplest gestures are seeds of peace. And if I had doubts, they would be erased the instant I saw my daughters repeating words I had barely just learned. I am not better than anyone. I was simply reached by an answer that my soul had been waiting for years. And if today you feel that something is out of place, that a piece is missing in your spiritual puzzle, I only ask you one thing. Seek. Read for yourself. Ask. Listen. Because whoever seeks with sincerity, sooner or later, finds what is really worth it. Islam is not a distant culture. It's not a strange people. It's a silent surrender that transforms everything from the inside out. That's what happened to me. That's what happened to my mother. And it could be what happens to you too. If this story spoke to you in some way, write in the comments what country you're watching this video from. I read them all. And share this testimony with someone who is also searching for answers. Sometimes a video is the seed the heart has been waiting for a long time. May peace and truth reach you, like a gift you didn't even know you needed. But that changes everything when it arrives.